Just a trigger warning, this episode is pretty graphic as it mentions assault and the R and M words, which I cannot say at the start of the video, so beware. On December 2nd, 1979, firefighters were called to the Travel Inn near Times Square. As they burst into room 417, they saw two badly burnt baby bodies on the twin beds. A firefighter grabbed one in hopes of saving a life. "I was preparing to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation," the firefighter said, "when I suddenly noticed there was no head." Today, Times Square is a glittering tourist attraction, but it had a much seedier reputation in the latter half of the 20th century. Not only was Times Square filled with adult shops, peep shows, and prostitutes, but it also became the hunting ground for serial killer Richard Cottingham, also known as the Torso Killer. For about 6 months between 1979 and 1980, Cottingham murdered sex workers in brutal fashion, leaving some without hands or heads. He soon earned the name of the Times Square Torso Killer or the New York Ripper. But Cottingham's viciousness was much deeper than the police realized at the time. In addition to killing sex workers, Richard Cottingham had also killed a number of girls and women in New Jersey. To date, the Torso Killer claims to have killed upwards of 100 victims. Born in the Bronx on November 25, 1946, Richard Cottingham lived an outwardly normal life. He'd spent his childhood in New Jersey, married his wife Janet in 1970, and had 3 children. At the time of his arrest, he was living in New Jersey with his family and spending his days working in New York as a computer operator at Blue Cross Blue Shields Association. But there was signs that Richard Cottingham was living a double life. He had an apartment in New York City that he told Janet he needed for late nights at work, and Richard spent a lot of time in their basement, where Janet later found women's clothing, shoes, and jewelry. Richard also had a self-described obsession with bondage and had numerous extramarital affairs. Janet had even filed for divorce in 1979, though she withdrew the divorce order the next year. "I was preparing to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation," the firefighter said, "when I suddenly noticed there was no head. As the smoke cleared, the firefighters realized they stumbled onto a gruesome crime scene. The women left in the room had been strangled, their heads and hands cut off, before the killer doused them both with lighter fluid and fled. One was identified as a 22-year-old Dide Godarzi, a sex worker. The other, a 16-year-old, remains a Jane Doe to this day." The baffled police had few clues to follow. The killer had registered at the hotel under a fake name with a fake address, Carl Wilson of Maryland, New Jersey, and hotel employees had hardly interacted with him. They offered a possible description of a man in his 30s, about 5'10" and 175 pounds, with brown hair. "We don't know if he's the one who rented the room," Deputy Sheriff Richard Nicosto said at the time. "We're not ruling out the possibility that 2 men could have been involved." A few months later, on May 5, 1980, a housekeeper at a Quality Inn in New Jersey found the body of a 90-year-old Valerie Ann Street stuffed under the bed. Street, a sex worker who'd arrived from Florida just a few days earlier, had been beaten, bitten, bound, and strangled to death. And less than a month after that, firefighters made yet another gruesome discovery near Times Square. On May 15th, they found the body of 25-year-old sex worker Jean Rayner in the Civil Motel. Her killer had cut her throat, left bite marks on her body, and severed her breasts. Still, the extent of Richard Cottingham's crimes shocked New York and New Jersey. Odell, who survived her encounter with the Torso Killer, described how he tortured his victims. "Richard told me to shut up, that I was a whore, and I had to be punished. He said the other girls took it, and I had to take it too. He said that uncountable times." It also came out at one of Richard's trials that he killed a 5th victim, 28-year-old X-ray technician Marianne Carr, whose body was found at the Quality Inn in 1977. What drove this married father of 3 to kill? Cottingham later described his motives as a game and mainly psychological. "I was able to get almost any women to do whatever I want them to do. Psychologically, it's godlike. almost you're in complete control of somebody's destiny. Richard Cottingham was convicted of 5 murders and sent to prison for a sentence of 300 years. But it soon came out that the torso killer had murdered many more than 5 victims. Though he's best known for killing sex workers, Richard Cottingham often killed whenever he had the opportunity. And thanks to a New Jersey detectives, the Times Square killer has confessed to a number of additional murders. Haunted by a handful of unsolved New Jersey homicides, Detective Robert Anzalotti began to wonder if Richard had killed more people than police knew. "I thought he could be responsible for some," Anzalotti said, explaining that while his methods and victims were different, the timing matched. His name had floated around in the lore of Bergen County cold cases, so the detective started spending time with the Times Square killer. He brought Richard to his office and offered him pizza and card games. Though Cottingham resisted at first, he slowly began to reveal details of his past crime. Thanks to Anzalotti's persistence, Richard Cottingham confessed to killing 29-year-old Nancy Vogel in 1967, 13-year-old Jackie Harp in 1968, 18-year-old Irene Blaze, and 15-year-old Denise Falaska in 1969, and 70-year-old Mary Ann Pryor, and 16-year-old Lorraine Kelly in 1974. In a sign of things to come, Cottingham had kidnapped Pryor and Kelly after they asked him for a ride. He brought them to a hotel room, tortured them, and dumped their nude bodies. He's younger when all this is going on in Bergen County, Anzalotti explained. "I think it was just an evolution in his killings." Though Anzalotti has retired, the detectives believe that Richard Cottingham could be responsible for dozens of other unsolved cases. To date, the torso killer himself claims that he could have as many as 100 victims. I think the detective is really smart. I mean, there's a reason why good cop, bad cop always works. You can't always force your way through things, especially with a serial killer when he offered him pizza, So when he offered him pizza and tried a different tactic, it worked. What amazes me is how come no one even tried this method before, and how many more serial killers would confess to more crimes if they had been given the good cop, bad cop treatment. Sure, they are scums and lowest form of human being, but it's better to treat someone who is bad to get some good information out of them than not do it at all. Obviously, Richard is a smart man and he was able to commit murders, but if we learn anything today, it's that you can never evade justice. Alright guys, and with that we end today's video. If you guys like this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment, tell me about what you thought of the video. A sub would mean the world to me, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.